In this section, I want to cover some of the leaf eaters that I didn't talk about earlier. Most of these are orthopterans, that is, grasshoppers and crickets. Most courses and textbooks that cover landscape insect and mite pests rarely cover some specialized feeders that eat flowers. Most of these are beetle adults, but there are a few caterpillars that are flower-eating specialists. The European earwig also is often found munching on flower petals, but we'll cover that one later. Because it wouldn't take much time to cover these pests, we'll also review the leaf-eating pests we have covered, just to see if you are remembering information about them. There are hundreds of species of grasshoppers and many species that feed on leaves of trees, shrubs, and flowers. The differential grasshopper is a general defoliator that can be found devouring tree leaves, perennial plants, and even some vegetable plants. Outbreak populations are rare, but when they do occur, usually after a wetter than normal spring, the nymphs and adults can quickly strip the foliage from plants. Often, other species of grasshoppers will appear as solitary nymphs that commonly munch on various plants in the landscape. There are many spiders and other predators that often keep these pests in check in our urban landscapes. The katydids comprise a very large family of jumping insects. They differ from grasshoppers in having very long antennae. Many species feed on the leaves of shrubs and flowers, but the most common species feed on tree leaves. The males sing by rubbing the front wing bases together to make their Katy, Katy, Katydid mating call. The nymphs are often brightly colored and easily spotted among landscape plants. The eggs are flattened ovals and are often attached in rows to branches of plants. These can often be mistaken for scale insects. Tree crickets are in the true cricket family, and they usually prefer to feed on tree leaves, but some species will commonly feed on the foliage of perennial and even some annual plants. Katydids and tree crickets commonly roam about on their plants, nibbling on leaf margins as they go. Because of this, their damage is rarely noticed. Walking sticks, or phasmids, are rarely pests in landscape plantings, but they occasionally are found, and their discovery immediately causes questions to be asked. The common northern walking stick occasionally has defoliating outbreaks in oak forests and black locust clumps. It will also feed on cherry, elm, and basswood. The nymphs are very good at hiding on the undersides of leaves. The larger nymphs and even adults can escape detection as they tend to hide on small branches that their bodies mimic. The prairie walking stick seems to like grasses, but it will also feed on various shrubs, especially firethorn. All produce eggs that look like plant seeds. The eggs can remain dormant for more than one season. When I find these walking sticks, I try to show people how harmless they are, and walking sticks should be appreciated for their unusual form of camouflage. Many beetle adults will feed on the flowers of various plants, and the scarabs are common culprits. The Japanese beetle is one of the most obvious, as the adults will often accumulate in masses to devour flowers. This is a major pest of roses, where the beetles seem to prefer the lighter colored flowers. The bumbling flower beetle is so called because of its buzzing flight characteristic. The adults feed on a wide variety of composite flowers. Its larva feeds on decaying organic matter and is commonly found in heavily mulched flower beds. The larvae look like the green June beetle because they crawl on their backs when exposed. Another invasive grub pest is the oriental beetle. The adults are rarely seen as they fly at night and commonly feed on flowers. Most of the flower-eating scarabs are primarily aesthetic pests, except for the Japanese beetle. Leaf beetle adults generally feed on plant leaves, but several species seem to prefer flower petals. In general, flower petals have lots of water and carbohydrates, which can supply water and quick energy to many insects. The spotted cucumber beetle is a major pest of cucumbers and squash plants where the beetles can transmit a bacterial wilt disease. The adult beetles dine on the squash and cucumber flowers, but they also will feed on the petals of composite flowers. They actually skeletonize the flower petals, which soon wither and turn brown. Likewise, many of the flea beetle adults feed on plant leaves where they make the characteristic pit-feeding holes. Some of these will also feed on flowers where they can devour entire petals or simply chew holes in the petals. I was tempted to include the blister beetles with the leaf-eating beetles, but decided to put them in the flower-eating group. Like the leaf beetles and flea beetles, many of the blister beetle species can eat both flowers and leaves. The black blister beetle is a very common late summer pest. The adults often eat the foliage of plants in the nightshade family like tomato, eggplant, potato, and even petunia. They will also feed on a wide variety of flowers and are common on goldenrod and aster flowers in the fall. Blister beetles generally have complicated life cycles where they parasitize the nests of solitary bees and wasps. A strange little weevil that is in the same family as the leaf-rolling weevils is known as the head-clipping weevil. These weevils come out in late June and are most evident in July when the females chew a circle of holes in the flower stems of coneflowers and other composites like brown-eyed Susan and sunflowers. These holes weaken the stem, which soon breaks in the wind. The female then crawls to the clipped flower and inserts an egg into the middle of the flower tissues. The flowers can hang on for some time, but they usually fall to the ground where the legless, grub-shaped larvae finishes its development. In the fall, the mature larva exits the head and digs into the soil to overwinter as a prepupa. Pupation and adult emergence occurs the next late spring. Controlling the landscape should include hand-picking of the weevils, which are often found in the clipped flower heads, and quick removal and crushing of the clipped flower heads to kill any larvae. Several species of geometrid moths have inchworm larvae that feed on flowers. Some eat the petals and others graze on the stamens and pistil tops in the composite flowers. Most go unnoticed as they often hide during the day and feed on the flowers at night. For years, I've occasionally found a looper that feeds on flowers, and it takes bits and pieces of the petals and leaves and attaches these to its body. A few years ago, I was watching honeybees work some joe pye flowers when I noticed that one of the flowers appeared brown and was moving. Upon closer inspection, it was one of these camouflaged caterpillars. It is known as the camouflaged looper. The adult moth is a little green geometrid and is called the wavy line emerald. As you may guess, every time this caterpillar molts, it sheds its old camouflage and it has to quickly snip off plant pieces and attach them to the new exoskeleton. It is common across eastern North America from Canada through Texas, but rarely causes significant damage. Several of the noctuid moths, which include the cutworms, armyworms, and vegetable loopers, have larvae that often feed on flowers. The tobacco budworm is notorious for this. As the name implies, the larvae seem to relish burrowing into the flower buds of various plants. As the larvae grow, they become general defoliators, but they will eat flowers and leaves. The species is quite variable in larval color. Larvae can range from a brown-purple color to bright green. The small moths are often missed, but they fly at night and attach small groups of eggs onto favored plants. There can be 2 to 3 generations per year in the northern part of the range, and continuous generations can occur in the Gulf state zones. The larvae tend to hide among thick leaves or deep inside flowers during the day and can escape detection until significant defoliation begins to occur. A common and brightly colored Noctua is often found feeding on goldenrod and aster flowers in mid to late summer. The caterpillar can be confusing because it can take on multiple color forms, apparently in response to the plant that it is feeding on. The range of colors can be pink, brown, and green with yellow stripes. If you look at the stripes, those are consistent in pattern. This species rarely occurs in abundance on any plant, and if it isn't appreciated, it can simply be knocked off and crushed. Our first review pest was found on a dogbane perennial plant. The entire top of the plant was tightly webbed over, and there were some caterpillar-like larvae inside. What would be the general name for this kind of pest? If you said webworm, you are correct, because the plant leaves are inside the webbing nest. So what are the two groups of larvae that make up the webworm group? Caterpillars and sawflies are the two kinds of larvae that can be webworms. How do you tell a caterpillar from a sawfly? Yeah, caterpillars have 5 or fewer prolegs, and sawflies will have more than 5 pairs of prolegs. Now this happens to be the nest of the ugly nest caterpillar, a common webworm that attacks various small shrubs and perennials. Our second review pest is one that has rolled up some cottonwood leaves. What would you call this kind of pest? If you said leaf roller, you are correct. If you said cottonwood leaf roller, you would be close, but remember that cottonwood trees are in the poplar family, and this is the poplar leaf roller. What is the most common insect group that does this leaf rolling? Most deciduous tree leaf rollers are caterpillars, and most are in the family Tortricidae. Why is this most likely recent activity? Most tortricid leaf rollers skeletonize the leaves that they roll up, and there is no evidence of this yet. A big basswood, which is a type of linden tree, was found in a landscape that looked like the leaves had some kind of leaf spot disease. Upon looking closer, there were some big blotches with the upper and lower epidermis intact, but numerous places had the top epidermis eaten away. Eventually, several of these little flattened beetles were found, and they appeared to be the ones eating the small patches of the leaf surface. What do you suspect this pest is? The blotch areas may be mines, and the surface feeding looks like a type of pit feeding that is typical of leaf beetles. When the blotches are held to the sun, small pellets are found. What are these blotches? These would be leaf mines, and the pellets are frass pellets. What is the adult beetle feeding called? We have already stated that this looks like pit feeding, but when it is extensive, the leaf will look like it has been skeletonized. So in review, this is the basswood leaf miner, another one of the leaf beetle species that mines leaves. This situation occurs all the time with landscape care companies. A nervous customer calls and states that she has found a really big caterpillar eating all the needles off of her pine tree. The caterpillar is easily 4 inches long. What would you suspect the caterpillar is, even without seeing it? Giant caterpillars are usually larvae of the silkworm moths or hornworms. In this case, if you asked if there was a horn on the rump, the answer would be yes, but this would lead you to the wrong conclusion. The real answer is that this is the pine devil, which is the larva of the regal moth. Even though the customer states that it is eating all the pine needles, these usually move about and will defoliate only a few branches. but they don't kill the pine buds for next year. What should you do? This is always a tough question when dealing with customers. The best solution is to move the caterpillar to a new pine tree where it is likely not to be noticed. If you can explain what this caterpillar is and give the customer information on what the caterpillar will turn into, they may decide to just leave it alone. Boxwoods can have a number of pest problems as well as some environmental issues. We have covered the boxwood leaf miner. This pest often causes overwintered leaves to turn a brown color before dropping. Boxwoods are also very susceptible to winter desiccation, especially if the shrubs are exposed to dry northern winds in the winter. Affected leaves often have a blanched look. There is also now a canker disease which is attacking boxwoods, which can cause the leaves to suddenly turn brown. How would you tell the difference between leaf miner and blanching? By looking at the backs of affected leaves, you should see the blisters of the leaf mines and see if they are the problem. But if the leaves are solid, then it's desiccation or disease. The owner may demand immediate treatment, but when is the best time to control the leaf mining pest? The first instar larvae can be controlled right after egg hatch, but they go dormant for the rest of the summer. The other time that the larvae are active is in October and November. This situation is actually tougher than it sounds. If you march in and tell a property owner that they shouldn't have these traps in their landscapes because the traps can actually cause more damage to be done to nearby plants, they are likely to be annoyed. It's difficult to explain to people who take great pleasure in capturing hundreds of Japanese beetles that they really aren't helping. Your response really depends on your relationship with the customer and your ability to explain how these traps work and how they fail to protect nearby plants. If the landscape is large, you may be better off having them move the traps away from the favored plants and more into open areas. A winding trail that ends in a blotch is typical of many of the agromysid leaf miners. In fact, this is the Daylily leaf miner, which is a relatively new invasive pest in North America. Since daylily growers share plants across the country, it has moved all across North America very rapidly. How would you confirm that this is a leaf miner and not a disease? If you hold a mine leaf up to the sun, you will see the frass trail, possibly even the larva still in the mine. Actually, there aren't any daylily foliage diseases that even look close to this. How would you control this pest? Well, the damage is primarily cosmetic and won't affect bloom. However, using a systemic when the first leaves emerge in the spring should take out the first generation, which will lessen activity for the rest of the summer. This finishes our modules that have covered the insect pests that have chewing mouthparts, and they either eat the leaves and needles, make nests with or over plants, but still eat the foliage, mine leaves and needles, or eat plant flowers. If you check in your textbook, almost a quarter of the book deals with these pests. However, as often stated, these foliage-eating pests rarely cause significant damage that puts the long-term health of the plant in jeopardy. Many are highly visible, and most gardeners think that they need to be managed. We will discuss the management approaches in later modules. Now we will turn our attention to insects that still have chewing mouthparts, but these pests burrow into the plant stems and trunks, the borers. Borers are often considered to be key pests in that they can girdle and quickly kill plants,